Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar about upcoming rule changes for importing goods from the EU into Great Britain, brought to you by the Institute of Export and International Trade in association with the Digital Trader Services. My name is William Barnes-Graham, the Senior Content Editor at the Institute, and I will be your host for this afternoon. And thank you all for joining us today. This is clearly a topic of great importance to British importers, and we already have over 300 of you on the call already, with more to come. So a warm welcome to all of you. If you have the next slide, please. So we have a panel of 3 very experienced and knowledgeable speakers today. Later on, we'll hear from Frank Dunsmuir, the Head of International Trade and Customs at Fujitsu, Shankar Singham, the CEO of Trade Law and Economic Policy Consultancy Computer, and first from Kevin Shakespeare, the Head of the Institute of Export and International Trade's Academy. Hi Kevin, how are you today? Good to have you here once again.
I'm good, Will. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you're well and hope everybody who's kindly linked in today as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. All 3 of our speakers are involved in the new Digital Trader Service, which we'll be hearing about later. And you can read more about their illustrious CVs in the slides, which we'll be sending after the webinar. Next slide, please. Before handing over to Kevin, though, I'd like to quickly run a poll to find out a little bit more about you, our audience. So we are asking you, what kind of goods do you trade? Please select all that apply here. The options are standard or non-controlled goods, SBS goods, that's products of animal origin or plant products, and that can include meats, vegetables, fruits, all sorts of products. Excise goods, that's things like alcohol, tobacco. Controlled goods, so that could be military or dual use goods, or none of the above, and you can select all that apply there. While you're answering that poll, just a couple of housekeeping notes. Firstly, you can contact me with any comments or questions using the question panel on the control window to the right-hand side of your screen. We hope to get to a number of your questions towards the end of the webinar, though please bear in mind we have already received a lot of questions in advance, so we'll not be able to get to all of your queries today. If you feel as though your question has not been answered, please do review some of the services we'll be talking about later on in the webinar. Secondly, as just noted, you will receive access to today's slide pack and a recording of the webinar in a follow-up email we will be sending over the next day or so. So please do try to listen in to today's presentation. So I'm just going to close the first poll and share the results. So interestingly, about 2/3 of you are traders of standard or non-controlled goods. A fair few of you are moving SBS goods, and as you'll find out later, that's particularly pertinent to some of the upcoming changes. So that's 28% of you, 22% controlled goods, 12% excise, and then about 1/10 of you, none of the above. If we move on to the next slide, I think we've got another poll. So I'm going to ask you just to get a sense going into the webinar, how prepared do you feel for the further upcoming rule changes for imports to GP from the EU? And the options there range from very prepared, quite prepared, not very prepared, not at all prepared, or not sure. Now, while people are answering that poll, Kevin, as noted, it's a pleasure to have you once again. The title of this webinar is, of course, about the upcoming rule changes. And I'm sure many traders are thinking, Brexit happened at the end of last year. How can there be further rule changes about to happen? So could you explain a little bit more about the title of today's webinar?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you very much, Will. Yeah, it's quite interesting that clearly there were a number of changes that came in from the 1st of January 2021, but there have been more changes, and part of it, as we're going to look at today, is a result of the phased border operating model for imports to GB from the EU. And again, there is different phases and stages of that border operating model. And also we mustn't forget that when we talk around the customs procedures to trade procedures. We've also got technical barriers to trade as well. So as I will refer to today, we've got other aspects of trade that are changing, which are due to regulatory and product compliance. So it really is due to the phasing. While some of the export impacts were more immediate, there is continual phasing throughout the course of this year, and even some into the early part of next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Really interesting, and I'm sure we'll be hearing the details all of that shortly. But to close that poll and share the results. So again, really interesting. So 42% of you have said you're quite prepared or 5% very prepared. So it's around a 50-50% split, 16% not sure though. So hopefully the 29% not very prepared, 7% not at all. Hopefully you may be feeling more prepared come the end of this webinar, but yeah, that's why we're here today to support. But Kevin, any surprises there? Is that about what you'd expect from your on the ground, kind of ear to the ground?
Yes, probably. And as I say, I appreciate from the first poll that the attendees will be in different industry sectors. So I guess the level of readiness may depend on the industry sector, because certainly for some sectors there are greater impacts. But yeah, probably about what I'd expect. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Well, thank you everyone for answering the 2 polls so far. But that's enough of me. Over to you, Kevin. Over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Will, and good afternoon again, everyone, and thank you very much for attending today. So we have an agenda today, but what I also want to do in the first part is really try and go through as many of the changes, particularly from an import perspective, but also want everyone to think about this in the context of supply chains as well. So it's not just about importing per se, it's about supply chains. It's your product, whether that's your product being sold in Great Britain, in Northern Ireland, in the European Union, the rest of the world, and the various trading blocks of the world. So very much consider that in the context that importing is very much part of a supply chain, and it's the end-to-end supply chain and end-to-end trade cycle that has to be considered. So what we're going to look at today for the first 20 minutes or so, which I'll do, we'll look at the changes in trading rules. Been very kindly joined by colleagues Shankar Singham and Frank Dunsmuir, and it's been an absolute pleasure to work with both Shankar and Frank, and it's great that we're able to share the actual presentation today, and it's obviously great to hear from them. We'll then look at elements around how to minimise the cost and risk of non-compliance. And in trade, we need to think about non-compliance, but also think about, I've done sort of speeches before around where trade compliance meets trade facilitation. So if you get your compliance right, you can gain competitive advantage and gain great opportunities for actual trade facilitation and to generate more trade, more export sales, more internal sales, and maximize your cash flow as well. Then we're going to have a Q&A for around 20 to 25 minutes. And thank you. We've received some absolutely fantastic questions already, and we'll do our best to get through as many of those questions as possible. Okay, so I guess a lovely point to start on. Government warning to businesses. So at the start of July, the government have written to a large number of businesses, and very much from the point of view 160,000 businesses about changes to the EU. So that's a huge number of businesses that the government's written to. And the letter included some key information. Again, to outline the cycles, the fact that export health certificates and pre-import notifications are required via a new system, IPAFS, from the 1st of October 2021. To also indicate that full import controls are in place from 1st of January. So when we mean full import controls, very much the controls for bringing goods in from the European Union to Great Britain from the 1st of January. I'm going to look at some of the implications for what we mean for full import controls. The requirements to submit supplementary declarations. So what we will talk around the phased border operated model and the potential that that businesses could have entered the import records in declarants records, and we'll refer to that. And then the suggestion to appoint a customs intermediary. And when we look at a customs intermediary, if you want to choose a good customs intermediary, you need to make sure that they have a range of services and also the technical knowledge and technical support to help your business. Because ultimately, using a customs intermediary, as a trader, you will still be responsible for every element of the customs declaration and every piece of information in the customs declaration, whether that's the commodity code, the origin of the goods, the valuation of the goods, the currency, and so on. So in the context of the actual border operating model itself, so what is the border operating model? So clearly it's around checks and controls on EU imports into GB being put into phases. So stage one, and we've always referred to this as easement period, started for import declarations. So it indicated that full frontier declarations were not required during the stage one process, and supplementary declarations were required 175 days after the goods movement. So if you imported goods on the 1st of February, the 1st of March, the 1st of April, the supplementary declaration is required 175 days after the goods movement. That's if you like use that easement period, which we'll look at. And stage two involves the export health certificates and IPATH notification for certain goods. And stage three then, and really important when we talk about stage three in the 1st of January next year, is frontier and safety and security declarations required for all goods. So the easement period as such, running throughout 2021, is that full frontier declarations are not required during 2021, but they still are required 175 days after the goods movement, the import of the goods into GB from the European Union. So as I said, if you brought the goods in February, March, April, 175 days from that date of import, goods movement, that supplementary declaration is required. But we're also going to focus today on stage three, because I think a lot has been lost in the impact of what's going to happen in the 1st of January next year. And also checks on animal and plant movements also phase. So for example, there could be checks at the point of destination currently, but from with the exception of live animals, from the 1st of January next year, full import controls and checks at the border. So initially we had the phased border operating model, which indicated that there was going to be a rollout from the 1st of April in terms of the products of animal origin, the SPS goods, but then that was changed. A further announcement on the 11th of March this year, producing a revised timetable, and that revised timetable is what we're very much working to at the moment. So as I've said, importers of animal products and animal byproducts. So again, I think we have to think about the nature of our goods, obviously linked to the commodity code, because you could have animal byproducts like fur, feathers as well, which also depend on the level of content will require to be pre-notified and could be subject to inspections. So we mustn't just think of this as animal products per se, it also includes animal byproducts. And then we start getting into January 2022. The requirement for safety security declarations on imports pushed back. So initially it was to be the 1st of January, it's now, sorry, the 1st of July, it's now going to be the 1st of January. And as I've indicated, customs declarations required at the point of import on all goods from the 1st of January. And then we have the checks on live animals and low risk plants from the 1st of March. Now, let's just consider about the easement period, because we talk a lot about easements, and what we mustn't do is just take them for granted and just assume they'll always be in place. We have the waivers for full frontier declarations that we've referred to. And when I refer to Great Britain, obviously I'm referring to England, Wales and Scotland, very much a different position for Northern Ireland. But then also we have waivers for safety and security declarations. Now, we think, I guess, as traders, if we're traders on the call, we think in terms of declarations. If we're hauliers, if we're freight forwarders and carriers, we also think then in terms of safety and security declarations. But perhaps as traders, we don't think of that. We just assume that somebody else is going to do that for us. It could be the haulier, it could be the freight forwarder. If we've only traded with the EU before, we don't think about export health certificates, certainly if we're importing. And we don't always think about import pre-notification if we've only dealt with the EU previously. And this is not just for animal products and animal byproducts, it's also for vegetables, fruits and plants as well. So it's very, very important to think across the range of different products here, not just animal products. Another important point I think needs to be mentioned, that if simplified declarations have been used, so it hasn't been a full frontier declaration, 175 days after the date of import, which is the maximum date that you needed to have made the full supplementary declaration, is that import duty would also be payable if you have not met the rules of origin. I'm going to talk a little bit about the rules of origin within the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement. And this is actually quite an important point, because when the announcement was made on the trade agreement on the 24th of December, the headline was very much tariff-free trade between the UK and the EU. But there was then what came out quite a complex system of rules of origin, bilateral accumulation, that came into play as well. So, and I kind of feel this has been a little bit hidden on the import side of the house. We think about it more on the exports to the EU. But we need to think about the imports is, are we certain that our supplier can meet the rules of origin, EU origin? So if we have simplified, we've used simplified declarations, or you've used that, or the goods have just come in and no declarations have been made, there could be additional import duty to be payable there, and no physical checks at the border for most goods. Again, we've just taken that for granted, but that's not going to be the case once the easement period ends. So here are some of the impacts when the full frontier declarations will be required, unless you have authorization or your agent has authorization for Customs Freight Simplified Procedures, CFSP, and there is a process to be gone through for CFSP authorization. It's not necessarily straightforward. Entry, safety and security declarations are required. So is your customs agent or haulier ready for those safety and security declarations? Now, clearly there'll be agents and hauliers on here today, and obviously you'll know your state of readiness in that regard. And traders also must start to think the mindset. Safety and security declarations are required effectively under WTO and WCO, World Customs Organization's regulations as a whole. They're required globally for all 182 member countries of the World Customs Organization. And we must remember clearly that certain goods cannot proceed through customs without export health certificates or phytosanitary certificates and import pre-notification. And I've talked around import duty being paid if the rules of origin are not met, but also there may be a requirement for a VAT adjustment as well. So effectively VAT is payable on import duty. So that's something else that businesses must be mindful of. Physical checks at border and the possibility of increased number of inspections. We probably, there could be some traders on this call that have had the goods inspected at the point of destination or their premises, but it does clearly stay in the border operating model, increased number of inspections once there's physical checks at the border. And a very important point, which again I kind of feel has been lost a bit, is GVMS, the Goods Vehicle Movement Service, is that will be required for certain ports. And yes, it is a port decision, but if we consider the likes of Dover, Eurotunnel, Holyhead as examples, there will be requirement for a GVMS entry as well. And that could be quite crucial here. So just as our mindset as traders perhaps is GVMS is somebody else's problem, I'm going to leave that to the haulier. You need to make sure that whoever you're using, whoever's supporting you, is aware of these requirements, because it could be quite easy to forget about the requirements for GVMS. So easement periods, some of these slides I've gone through before, so I'm going to sort of talk over them fairly quickly. But just to mention, these slides are available to you and will be sent to you following the call today. So these are very important also as an aid memoir and to support you. So this really refers to the phase-in, the timings that I've indicated. Now, process for importing goods. So let's just use this as an example. So standard goods, and I appreciate there's quite a few of you today who are importing standard goods. You have this EIDR, this option of entry into declarants records and supplementary declaration. But upon making of a supplementary declaration, 175 days before the date of import, if you're operating compliantly, you will require CFSP authorization, or your agent must be CFSP authorized. So that becomes a key point. So effectively, you have this rolling 175 days. That doesn't mean that you do not need to make declarations during 2021. It is a rolling 175 days. Okay, and then so key takeaways here is not subject to controls 175 days after the date of import. And as my colleagues Shankar and Frank are going to refer to, DTS, Digital Trader Services, have developed a simple to use platform to support traders, recognizing that there is a real need to support traders in the marketplace. There's other factors we must consider as well. So goods, for example, trading in endangered species, which could cover a range of products, will require certification and must exit the EU via designated ports. You have the import declaration, the entry safety and security declaration I referred to, and GVMS as well. And also we can see that if your goods require an import license, so certain types of goods such as dual use items that have both a civilian and a military purpose, chemicals, certain medicinal goods, drugs sold under license, for example, they will require an import license as well. So something else that if trading with the EU previously, some traders may not be fully familiar with. Now, SBS goods, we've talked about additional requirements here for certification. It's absolutely essential that your EU supplier understands that they need that export health certificate. And there's the import pre-notification provided to effectively produce the CHED, the Common Health Entry Document as well. So very important, and we must think about this across the range of SBS, not just products of animal origin. Okay, so and then we have excise goods, which normally would or could move under duty suspension, and the requirements there. Now, what happens if you do not submit a supplementary declaration on time? HMRC has warned firms that don't comply. You could lose the option of delaying future declarations. Now, and clearly there are benefits to delaying declarations in terms of very much a simplified data set. And that has implications in terms of generating the GVMS entry. And you have to submit all declarations information at the point of import, which is an increased data set. And clearly it could be subject to financial penalties, which impacts the business's cash flow. So as international trade and customs is becoming increasingly digitalized with terms that we've referred to like single window, having that good track record with customs, which is also important for use customs special procedures, duty minimization, customs authorizations. That good track record with customs is absolutely fundamental. It can gain competitive advantage in the supply chain as well as assisting cash flow. A point which I'm sure those of you heard me before have heard me talk enough about Incoterms. And I've mainly talked about Incoterms in the context of exports. We must think about it in the context of imports and put ourselves potentially in the shoes of our EU supplier. Now, under the 11 Incoterms, under Incoterms 2020, there would be only one Incoterm, which would be responsible of your EU supplier to take care of all the import, the UK import formalities and requirements, and that would be DDP, delivered duty paid. Now, it could be, we'd expect that in a majority of cases, it would be the other Incoterms. So, for example, DAP, delivered at place, FCA, free carrier, that would be used. But if your EU supplier is using DDP at the moment, they could push back to you when full import controls are required and certificates and pre-notification are required. So don't just assume that if your EU supplier is selling on DDP terms today, they will continue to do so. So my final slide before I pass over to Shankar is other changes to prepare for, and these are very important. So we've talked around the preferential zero tariff rate, but you must satisfy the rules of origin. So, and rules of origin, as I said, are quite a complex area. If you cannot meet these rules, you can consider duty mitigation options such as customs special procedures, possibly customs warehousing or inward processing if it's a processing transformation process, and possibly returns goods relief as well. And another easement, if we cut, is the requirement for supplier declarations. And this is going to, I think, be quite a big issue in late December and next year, is that under the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement, it requires a statement of origin on the commercial invoice, pro forma invoice, etc. And it's based on importers' knowledge. But increasingly, there will be more requirements for importers to actually require supplier declarations, and for even long-term supplier declarations up to 2 years. So do be aware of that requirement in terms of that. Are you able to provide that supplier declaration if you're exporting? Even if you're getting the goods from the UK, are you certain that they've originated in the UK? We have the VAT requirements and the recent from the 1st of July ending of a low value consignment relief and the introduction of the EU import one-stop shop, which again has had a big impact in terms of the e-commerce market and the need to access the import one-stop shop requiring fiscal representation in some EU member states, for example, France and other southern European countries. And then we have the UK CA mark required from the 1st of January. So that's just an overview. I hope you found that interesting, but I wanted to just go beyond the simple, sorry, not simple, the concept of the customs declaration and get into other important requirements like safety and security declarations, GVMS, the other documentations and certifications requirements, and I think we've all got to avoid, and I'm sure you have, being lulled into this false sense of security, not just on the customs declaration, but across the whole trade and customs journey. So at this stage, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Shankar Singham, who will go through a few slides. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much, Kevin. And just from your last comment about not be lulled into a false sense of security, we wanted to think about some scenarios that might actually happen to traders and how this would sort of play out in the course of the rest of the year. One common scenario we're hearing from traders is, we thought we had a year until we needed to complete declarations, i.e. the supplementary declaration part of the import declaration. So we're just not prepared for this. Now, the important point here is that, as Kevin, discussed, the requirement is that you have to do a supplementary declaration within 175 days of the date you move the goods. So, notwithstanding the delay on when you have to do the full declaration and there's no entry into declarant's record easement, which is January of next year. If you move goods in January of this year, then you've already passed this date. You already have to have done the supplementary declaration. And if you don't do it, the import declaration is a single unitary thing. The EIDR and the supplementary declaration, or the, if you're going to use a simplified frontier declaration and the supplementary declaration, this is one unitary declaration. And if you don't complete it, then technically you are smuggling, and that will have consequences, which is why HMRC has sent the notification to traders that they have. So to summarize, if you imported goods on the 1st of January or shortly after that, the 25th of June was the operative date by which time you had to do the supplementary declaration. And if it's the 2nd of January, that's the 26th of June. If it's the 3rd of January, that's the 27th of June. So it goes on. It's a rolling process. If we go to the next slide. Another example of things that traders might literally be finding themselves in the middle of. We import textiles from Germany, and we haven't been concerned about tariffs because there's a deal, isn't there? There's a UK-EU trade deal, and there's zero tariffs. And wasn't that the big debate that we sort of read about in the newspapers? Unfortunately, the situation is slightly different. So if we can have the next slide, there we go. So you need to look at the rules of origin of the UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement. And having worked on a number of trade agreements over the last 30 years, it is unfortunately the case that the rules of origin in the UK-EU TCA are relatively strict, which means that there will be many people whose goods don't qualify for that tariff-free treatment. Because they won't comply with the rules of origin because of certain content from outside of the EU coming into GB, or either local content or special rules that apply to specific sectors that are set out in the trade agreement. Mean that you don't actually qualify for that tariff-free trade, which means that a tariff has to be paid, and the trigger point for paying that tariff and being in compliance with the rules is the supplementary declaration, in the case if you're using the easement. And one example there would be, is very true in the textile area, and here you need to be particularly aware of what's going on, because the tariff, if you do have to pay a tariff in some sectors, textiles being one, is very high. It's a 15% tariff for textiles. As I said, the duties have to be payable at the point at which the supplementary declaration needs to be submitted, which is that 175 days from movement. So that 25th of June, 5th of June, 26th of June, 27th of June rolling program is when the duties would have had to be paid, and that's a legal requirement, and not doing it is a violation of the law. So we go to the next slide. So the three main challenges we see for traders are: one, they may have a very large backlog of supplementary declarations going back to the beginning of the year. These need to be dealt with, and we know from talking to the traders and talking to particularly hauliers and freight forwarders, that the information, the data that's required to do this is not really in the kind of shape it needs to be in order to make these declarations easily. Obviously, there is a lack of familiarity with new customs processes. There are many traders who have never really had to do a customs process because they've been trading entirely within the EU, as it then was EU28 prior to the UK's departure. And the other problem that people are experiencing is that, as with any product where the supply is lower and the demand is greater, you might find that the prices for doing these processes, when you hire people to do them on your behalf, the prices are going up quite a lot, and they may be increasing. We've heard numbers like 10-fold increase in pricing and so on. So there are high expenses that might be required to respond to the new rules. So those are the sort of three main immediate challenges that traders will face. And these are all, as I say, the important takeaway I think from this is that this is all live now. If you've been importing goods into GB from the 1st of January, then this requirement is in place right now. So with that, I will hand over to Frank to finish up the presentation.
Thank you, Shankar. And I've got a few slides on what the Digital Trader Services product is, what that offering is, and how that can help those of you that are now having to do customs declarations potentially for the first time for your trade with the EU. In order to introduce that, a quick recap of the traditional options for customs declarations. So two main options. If you are already doing international trade, option one, and you are familiar with the customs procedures, then firstly, you may have understood most of today's presentation, but you're also in the fortunate position of perhaps being able to do customs declarations yourself for the EU, for the trade that you now do with the EU. Excuse me. Some of the challenges we're hearing from those types of organizations are, yes, that's all very good, but I need to expand my team to meet with the new demands, the new volumes for my trade with the EU. And that sort of resource is quite scarce to find and to recruit in and to retain. The second option is you can go to a customs intermediary. The intermediaries typically offer a great service, offering advice and guidance, as well as providing the declarations for you. And as Shankar just mentioned there, they are now in short supply. So if you're going down that option, you need to secure customs intermediary as quickly as you can, because the additional demand from the new volumes for EU trade is soaking up that resource capability in the market as quickly as possible. So there is a third option, and this is the Digital Trader Services, which we introduced recently, launched recently. And this is all based on using technology solutions so that we can offer a self-service option for those of you that aren't familiar with customs procedures and administration, but you can use this system to create declarations for yourself, or for your business rather. So with very little or minimal customs knowledge, you can use that platform to create your own customs declarations. And I'll show you in a few screens what that looks like. Again, businesses are very interested with the feedback we've had on the product so far. Is it gives them better visibility of their trade and their customs position, their compliance position, because they can see all of their transactions in one place. And also lots of interest from freight forwarders and hauliers who are moving the goods and physically moving the goods between GB and EU. And they're quite often asked to provide the customs declarations. Many of them are not familiar with that kind of process, etc. So it's a challenge, and it's one that also offers opportunity in terms of business growth and service to their customers. So let me take you through a few slides on what the concept of a digital trader service is and how it looks and feels. So first of all, it's not just an online portal and a smart looking system. There are education materials there to help you guide you through the technicalities of trade between GB and the EU. Those produced by Institute of Exports. First-class education material and checklists are available for those of you that sign up to the service. There's also expert advice on hand, so through to the contact centre and through to consultants of senior levels if the questions are that bit more complex. So lots of advice and guidance available for those that need it and perhaps going through these processes for the first time. And on the next slide, the really interesting thing about the Digital Trader Service is, for those of you that may be familiar with customs or have seen standard customs software products, the customs process involves an awful lot of codes. So your commercial invoice is coded as Z380 and the commercial invoice number. The DTS doesn't do that. It asks you questions in plain speak. What is your commercial invoice number? And behind the scenes, our system starts enriching that data and adding the customs codes and requirements to the answers that you provide. And that way, we've found that something like 70% of the data entry can be automated. So there are around about 4 screens with a handful of questions, and I do mean a handful, it's something like 20 questions in total to create a declaration on the system, so it's quick and easy to do. For those of you that work with Excel, you can use our Excel spreadsheet to upload lots of lines of information if you want to. And for those of you with more advanced technology, you can use the API, the standard API feature to automate data entry from your internal IT systems. So it has at the heart of it this smart engine, which is doing an awful lot of data enrichment. And the benefit for you is you don't need to know lots of different customs codes and procedures as you enter the data. And on the next slide, once you've completed your declarations, it goes through checklists, making sure the data is complete and the data is correct and relevant, and it allows you to submit once the all of the data is provided and is in the required format. If it's not, you can save and you can come back to it later. So you can partly raise declarations, as it were, or the information, and submit when you have all of the data you need to create the declaration. If there is a problem with that data, or again, with some of the questions that are asked, etc., we deal with that for you. So if the declaration is submitted and for some reason the HMRC system creates an error on that process, we're continually monitoring that for you, and we'll look at that error and we'll either work with you or we'll correct the error on the fly, as it were, if it's an obvious one. So you're getting service at the beginning and at the end of the process, as it were. And finally, on the next slide, I mentioned before, there's a lot of the feedback about the service has been this interest around one point of access, one source of data. So you have a dashboard on the system that shows your history of transactions and declarations. You have access to copies of the declarations themselves on your system, so the files are there. And of course, if you've uploaded invoices and the like, they're there on the system for you. So you have one source of information that you can keep and maintain for your records and for audit purposes if required. So I hope that's given you a flavour of the new DTS. And for those of you that are interested in it, please look to the website. It's simply digitaltraderservices.com, all one word, and you're able to sign up and create an account for free and get access to some of the materials, education, and information about the launches of the products and the services as it continues to grow.
Great, thank you, Frank, and also to Shankar and Kevin before Frank as well. Lots of information, lot to take in there, but yeah, thank you all three of you for some really good presentations there. As Frank mentioned, we'll be sending more information about Digital Trader Service after the webinar to everyone who's registered. But to get us into the Q&A, first of all, as mentioned, a question for you as we go into the questions. This is just to gauge kind of how prepared you feel now for the new rules, which have been mentioned throughout this webinar. So the options again range from very prepared to not at all prepared. So it'll be really interesting to see if there's been much movement during this webinar. But let's get into the questions while you're answering that. We had a question quite recently, and this is really getting to the point which has been made in this webinar, but I think it's important to clarify this. So this is a question from Martina, who has asked, is it right that we do not need to complete any declarations until the easement period ends? This is really the crux of it. So I don't know, Shankar, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so that's I know that is a common view, and that's not correct. And I think that's one of the things we wanted to stress here today, that if you have moved goods during this period of the first 6 months of the year, which of course many people will have done, then you absolutely have to do declarations as of that date that we stressed, which is June the 25th. So, and they have to be rolled back 175 days when the obligation, when the first, movement into GB commenced. So, absolutely, you need to be in a mindset that we need to do declarations now, that this is now required. And the easement is a rolling easement, so that it will continue until the end of the year with this obligation of 175 days. So again, the number you need to sort of fixate on is 175. 175 days after movement, I've got to do something. I've got to do a supplementary declaration.
Thank you, Shankar. So that really is the number 175 days is the real thing to bear in mind. One for Frank, just while people are still answering that poll. This is from someone called Jonathan, who says, we are working with a customs intermediary already. Why should we use the digital trader service? And another one related to this is from Alessandro, who asks, what is the difference between using DTS and an intermediary?
Yeah, really good questions. And if you're working with a customs intermediary and you're happy with the services and obviously commercial arrangements, etc., then it's something you should seriously consider before you switch from that, because they do provide a valued service. The difference between the DTS and the customs intermediary services, first of all, complementary, you have access to consultants, to advice and guidance, etc., from either the customs intermediary typically, and certainly from the DTS. The main difference really is the DTS is aimed at a self-service type approach. So it's offering you more control of when you're doing the declarations, when you're submitting declarations, etc. It's very much using the sort of data that you would send to an intermediary anyway. So you're having to collate data to send to an intermediary. So instead of going through that process and maybe exchanging a few times on questions and queries, you're able to submit that data straight into a system. And then once you've done that, you have access to that data in your system whenever you need it. So you've got that control within your own capability in your own business, really. So that, I would say, the main differences between the two types of services. And if my colleagues want to add anything into that.
No, I think, hi, it's Kevin here, but yeah, I think Frank summed it up. I think it is that is to support the additional information as well. And I think it's important, I think, for all traders, whoever you use, to recognize ultimately it's your liability, and whether it's things like commodity codes, origin, valuation of goods, your liability. And I think that that important point and the support DTS can offer in terms of the additional resources becomes really important. And we must think of trade. Customs declaration is a very important part of it, but all the other elements are, getting the commodity code correct, etc., really become fundamental.
Yeah, I would.
And some of the interesting scenarios. Oh, sorry, Shankar.
Sorry, Frank. I'll just I'd add a couple of things to that. Where are the gaps, basically, if we have to do EU to GB customs declarations for imports? I mean, the big gaps are knowledge. So I think one of the things that DTS has in answering that is the sheer number and expertise in the customs area to be able to educate traders about what their obligations are. And the other big gap is how do we make the process, the border management process, a much more user-friendly kind of process and sort of bring it into the 21st century. There, I think the use of things like what the DTS has, which is the sort of smart decision engine, where the trader's answering questions, but not necessarily highly sophisticated customs questions, and the engine does all the work. I mean, I think that is the way that we're going to go, frankly, around, not just here in the UK, but in the world, on border management processes. And both those two core areas, DTS, I think, is has a very good answer on. So if you're trying to do this, I would ask that question of whoever you're going to use, and can you cover me in those two areas, because I think they're going to be absolutely key.
And there was an interesting scenario with an international company that was interested in using DTS to complement their internal team, as I mentioned before. So they are busy trying to recruit and grow their internal team, but they don't have the knowledge. So the DTS platform allows them to still retain the control within the internal team, and using a platform that that doesn't really require the expertise and knowledge of a traditional customs administrator would need.
Thank you all three of you. It's a really good conversation there, and I think the two words I was hearing a lot were control and visibility. So really interesting to hear all of that. I'll just close that poll, by the way, just to share the results. There has been a bit of a movement actually. So 62% now quite prepared, 8% very prepared. So that's up. I think it's around 20%. I think it was 50% were prepared before at the start of the webinar. So that's good to see. And a few of you are feeling less prepared, only 19% between not very and not at all. So I'm glad people have found this useful. What I will do, because we do actually have another poll, so I'll bring this forward, this last poll, and I'll do it just while we're going through the Q&A. And it's just to ask if people would like to be contacted with more information about the Digital Trader Service. And I'll just leave that running for a few seconds while we do a few more questions. We're doing another question on DTS quickly. This is from Paula, who's asked, do you need to be Cfsb authorized to use DTS? And if, I don't know if it puts to Frank first, if you want to explain what Cfsb is as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yes. Customs Freight Simplified Procedure. So if you want to take advantage of simplified frontier processes, and the current easement is simplification, then you need to be authorized by HMRC to be able to be allowed to use those processes. So if you have brought goods in under the easement and you don't have declarations for them at the frontier, you now need to create a supplementary declaration. You need to be CFSP authorized to do that. So again, one of the advantages of the Digital Trader Services is we would use our CFSP authorization for customers that are using the service to raise supplementary declarations.
Thank you, Frank. I've got a few questions here. We've got one for Kevin. Actually, it's your favourite topic. It's anchor terms. This is from Nigel, who's asked, my EU supplier sells on DAP terms. Can you confirm what this means for me as the UK buyer?
Yeah, so again, I think it's always important to clarify, because we do band about these Incoterms, and there is a lot of information on the internet, but it's not always entirely clear. So in terms of Incoterms 2020, DAP delivered at place. So in terms of your responsibilities, thinking it purely about yourself, you would be responsible for the import declaration and all elements of that import declaration. So all the fields that we've referred to, the commodity code, the currency, the amount, the valuation of the goods, the origin of the goods, etc. You are responsible for that under DAP delivered at place, whilst your European supplier is responsible for getting the goods to the named destination, which could be your premises, for example. You are responsible for the import declaration. You are also responsible, depending on the nature of the goods, for any additional certification and licensing. So if, for example, we're talking about SPS goods, sanitary and phytosanitary goods, you are responsible for the import pre-notification. If the goods require an import license, so for example, they're dual use goods, or they're chemicals or certain medicinal goods, you are responsible for having that import license. So and you are also responsible for the import VAT. Yes, you can use you can use postponed VAT accounting, and you are also responsible for any import duty if the rules of origin are not met under the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement. But a great question. I think it's always important to clarify. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, the number of webinars we've been on, and Incoterms, review your Incoterms. It's a big step. That's always one of the big learnings. So good to have that question as always. I'm just going to close the poll now. Thank you everyone for answering. Really appreciate it. If we just move on to next slide, and we can just see a bit more about our speakers again. That'd be fantastic. Thank you. So a question we had in before from Catherine, who's an importer of meats from Germany, and has asked, will our goods be subject to inspections, and what documents do we need to provide? So I don't know, Shankar, do you want to cover meats and I guess SPS in general would be good to go through?
Yeah, so Kevin had outlined earlier on the slide. There's some of the rules that relate to checks, which I think what the question was really focused on. So there will be a need as the UK as a whole moves through the easements on agricultural SPS, sort of food and agricultural products. And there will be a system called IPAFs where you need to get the relevant export health certificates and so forth for your trade, and that process starts in October, and there's a series of time deadlines as Kevin outlined, and you will need to be aware of that, and you will need to know what you need to do. And then what you do is you once you get those certificates and those other licensed product, you need to include that in your customs declaration, and that would be sort of entered into the DT or whatever other customs provider you're using. They would have to enter that for the movement of those goods. So if you are moving goods that are either SPS goods, food, agricultural products, anything like that, there will be requirements, and there will be requirements on other regulated products as well.
Thank you, Shankar. So there's a fair bit of research to be doing there, but again, that's something DTS can help with. And we've got time for one more question. So we've got a couple more slides to show before we go. Thank you everyone for all the questions. It's been so many of them, and unfortunately we're going to get through to all of them today, but we'll say a little bit more in a second about how you can get those questions answered afterwards. This is a question in from Harry, who's said, and this is quite a theme to be honest, he says he's a small business, this is all very new to us, how can we cope, what support is there for us? So I don't know who wants to start on that one, it's quite a biggie. Kevin, do you want to start on that one, and then we'll open it to the floor?
Yeah, and again, it's always good to raise these questions. I think it is difficult for small businesses. There are lots of complexities, and especially for those small businesses that have only previously traded with the European Union. So there is a lot of information out there, but it's not. It is a lot to comprehend, and the most important person at the end of the day is yourself and your business. So. Which is why I think we're very much involved in the DTS Digital Trader Services, so that support can be provided for businesses like yourself, both in terms of trying to make it more straightforward for you to actually meet your regulatory requirements of the customs declaration, but also to provide that technical support as well. So it's trying to create something and turning it into a more digital environment for you that makes it easier without you having to keep going back and forth, asking lots of questions, seeking lots of explanations. But also by having that profile of businesses such as yourself, we can offer suggestions about the wider elements of customs and trade that can support you as well. But I'm sure Shankar and Frank will add to what I've just said. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to just underscore a couple of points. I mean, one is really emphasising something that Kevin said in the presentation, actually, which is very applicable to small traders, which is sometimes if you're a small trader and you haven't really done this before, you focus on the bit of it that you have to do, and you sort of disregard everything else and say it's somebody else's problem, whether it's the haulier or whoever. One of the things Kevin talked about was the GVMS link, which goes live for certain ports at the end of the year. There is going to be a lot of pressure on the frontier, the border between the EU and GB. And what you don't want to do if you're a small trader is sort of ignore all of that and then suddenly find that because of that pressure on the frontier that your goods are sort of stuck somewhere. They might be very, very needed imports that you need in order to produce your products. So you have to be aware of what's going on, and you have to devise ways of doing your declarations that make sense and that allow you to remove that pressure on the frontier. The other thing that would be applicable, I think, to maybe slightly larger businesses is that we're all very conscious of the fact that because we were all in the customs union, single, and single market the EU before, we didn't really understand what our supply chains look like. And that area of supply chain management and data that you need is going to become very, very important, in the future. And it will be important for anyone who's in that supply chain, which includes obviously the large businesses that tend to own those supply chains, as well as the people who are in the middle of them, which is very often, small traders who may assume that they're not really involved in international trade, but actually they are. So I'd sort of underscore those two points.
Well, I think that's probably time for the Q&A to finish. Kevin, I think we've got, well, we are slightly overrunning, but if you could quickly run through the next couple of slides really quickly, and then we'll wrap up.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. So again, thank you everyone for attending today. It's been greatly appreciated. So obviously today's webinar has been hosted by the Institute of Export and International Trade, who are committed to professionalising of all elements of international trade, exports, imports, supply chain management, customs, logistics, and so on. And we're very keen to provide services to businesses and individuals. We have seen a rapid growth in our membership, and now we have 4,900 members. And we provide a range of services to help, including educational training programs and representation. And also we have been heavily involved in the grant funding schemes. The Institute's been heavily involved in the UK Customs Academy. Also for businesses, if you're thinking about recruiting, you have graduates or you have existing people, there is a degree apprenticeship levy program as well. And we have degree programs, but also further education programs at education level 2 and 3 as well. You can access apprenticeship levy funding. So as the funding moves away from the grant funding to capacity build, do consider some apprenticeship levies where you can get 100% as a levy payers, but 95% access to small businesses. But most of all, thank you to everyone for listening to us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Very quickly said, but very well said as well. So yeah, we're going to wrap up now. Thank you once again to Kevin, Shankar and Frank for your advice and time today. I hope everyone has found that really useful. Just a reminder, we will be sending all registrations a recording of today's webinar along with a copy of the slides over the next day or so. But for now, thank you for joining. Please do let us know what you thought of today's webinar in the exit survey, and we'll say goodbye. Thank you, everyone. Bye.